Joined by Republican strategist Rina Shah and NewsNation political contributor Chris Hahn. We've talked about this, guys. I mean, for most voters polled to say they're concerned about President Biden's age affecting his ability to serve, this is something that is going to keep going on until 2024. Chris, do you believe most Americans, Democrat or Republican, think that he looks like a fragile grandfather, but they still believe he's a better choice than President Trump?
At the end of the day, it's going to come down to the choice, right? He is going to be 81 years old, 86, 85 when his term ends. I think most Americans will say, yeah, that's pretty old. You probably should be retired sitting on a beach somewhere sipping a pina colada and not with your hand on the button. But that said, you know, right now we're at that pre-buy stage where we're saying, what do we want in a presidential candidate? We want somebody younger than Joe Biden. We also probably want somebody younger than Donald Trump. And I think it becomes a bigger issue should the Republicans go in a different direction than Trump and nominate somebody like a Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis, who are significantly younger than Biden.
His wits, though, President Trump's wits seem to be about him in terms of age compared to Joe Biden, though you could argue his wits are off because of other reasons. But
yeah.
Americans...
You think?
Yeah, Americans are concerned about President Trump's age. More than 37% of Americans say they're very concerned about it. Do you believe that all of the indictments and the concerns about the politicization or the weaponization of the justice system against the former president have really given an eclipse to any concerns about President Trump's age?
I don't think the indictments or anything else related to Trump or really Trump world has any tie-in to his age. I think there's one really very clear sort of vision that Republicans are trying to project right now is that Biden just can't do the job because he regularly has these sort of cognitive as well as, physical fragility. And that is kind of one of those moments in which we have to say, what are Republicans doing here? Are they missing the moment in which to talk about their ideas and say we're a party with a different vision. We're not going to make this about identity. We're not going to make this about, going sort of for the lower jabs. They don't do that. What they're doing instead is going for Hunter Biden, the entire Biden family, and they're trying to make it about that. So less so than his age, I felt for a long time that Biden may step aside just due to that fact. How do you weather the storm from Capitol Hill that is incessant? Over and over again, they want to continue to make this about Biden and his family. And so, yeah, his age is a major factor. But on the one hand, you've got Trump projecting real physical strength. It's almost as if no days have moved on since he left the White House. I find that really surprising that Trump continues to project this physical strength. And Biden, again, time is not going in reverse and not being kind to him.
Until he don't.
What did you say, Chris?
I mean, Trump presents this physical strength until he doesn't, right? He has had his own senior moments over the years. And unfortunately for the Republicans, they are planning on nominating this guy who's going to be in his 80s as well. And he is prone to having these moments, too. So if they want to make Biden's age an issue, they probably shouldn't nominate a guy as old as Biden. They should nominate somebody younger, then it's an issue. And I do not believe that the Republicans attacks on Hunter Biden are going to get Joe Biden out of the election. I don't believe that at all. The only thing that will get Joe Biden out of the election is him determining that he would rather be retired than spend 4 more years in the most stress-filled job on the planet. And I don't think that's going to happen, at least right now. I think he's moving full steam ahead. Yeah, he might have some senior moments. Mitch McConnell has some senior moments. If we're worried about their age, we should have a battle of the network stars between Trump and Biden where they compete in some physical activities. They could bring Mitch McConnell and Senator Feinstein with them and see which team does better, in 3-legged races or whatever. But that's not what the American people are going to ultimately decide on. They're going to want to decide on who's going to be best for them.
Chris, that's really cute, but you know that this is not the Facebook domination between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and age fighting. In terms of useful information right now, do you believe, Chris, that the White House should address age? Do you believe that it should address the senior moments? Whether it is Mitch McConnell or where you're saying President Trump, you can look at our polling, you can look at Wall Street Journal reporting. Yeah. There are far more Americans concerned about President Biden and his mental capability and the fact that he seems wobbly than President Trump. I mean, and that's just the facts. 74% of respondents in the Wall Street Journal poll alone said they thought President Biden was too old compared to 47% who said that about Trump.
You can't ignore 74% of Americans' feelings.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.